we have Dish from the Clanker team, who, we acquired Clanker last week, and so that's big news. For those that aren't aware of you and Clanker, would you be able to share a bit more?
Sure, yeah. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. I'm Jack at Dish on Farcaster. Yeah, I'm a developer, built Clanker about last year. And it's been such a cool experience just getting able to chat with all these, very creative and talented developers, primarily around the Farcaster ecosystem. And I could not be more excited to be working with Linda and the Farcaster team now.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you guys. And to me, because I've been shadowing Dish in a bunch of calls recently, and it's really clear to me, part of why Clanker has done so well. I feel like you guys just really care about your community, and I think it really shows. So excited that Farcaster team can help accelerate and integrate more natively and help it grow more. So you guys, did such a great job. Huge fans, and fun to be part of the same team. So the goal of this stream was basically Clanker 101. I think that even myself, learning a lot over the past few days on just all the mechanics of Clanker and how it works, I think can be a little bit intimidating for some builders, and I think just learning best practices. So the goal here was really to just kind of ask you questions and get a bit of a rundown on Clanker. So I guess one thing just to start is how do you, use Clanker? What exactly is the format for it? How does one launch a token?
Totally. Yeah, so we made Clanker so it's super simple to deploy a token. The first method is on Farcaster by just tagging at Clanker with name, symbol, image. If you want to vault some supply, you can just tell the bot to do that as well. And you can also airdrop to the people you follow through that deployment method as well. You can also deploy a token through clanker.world/deploy. There you can kind of customize it a little bit more, whether that's, kind of like a custom starting market cap, fee configuration. You can also upload a list of airdrop recipients through there as well. Additionally, you can vault some supply there too. It's almost kind of booking a flight, right? I feel like sometimes you want to do it through a desktop. So you can do it through there, you can do it through the mini app as well. And for the more technical, you can also deploy tokens through that requires an API key, but hit me up if you need one of those. You can also do it permissionlessly through our SDK as well. So the SDK is what I would recommend, developers that are more experienced with customizing tokens. You can kind of tweak whether it's the sniper kind of configuration there, and also different paired tokens, and then custom fee mechanics there. So that I would say is the more extendable version. Check it out. There's also admin methods there as well. For example, claiming tokens or claiming rewards, claiming airdrops, and the dev supply there as well.
Awesome. Well, okay, speaking of dev buy, dev supply, I think a lot of the part that at least I've been talking to people on is token management, and kind of just once you have the token, or even just before you launch a token, how do you think about token management? So would love to hear if you have any best practices or things that people should be thinking through.
Sure, totally. Yeah, so I would say the first step, right, is what will this token, kind of do, or and again, it's kind of starting with an idea, right? I think that's the first step. And then working backwards from there, right? Whether it's if you want to designate a certain supply for the team, maybe future, contributors or investors, setting aside, I would suggest around 20 to 30%. The general rule of thumb that I like to say is only set aside the amount of tokens that are required. You can be a little bit more, you can do a little bit more, I'd say, but to enable the most healthy trading experience, putting as much as you can into that liquidity pool results in just a smoother swap. So yeah, I'd say kind of doing that. That's kind of the technical side there, and that includes also the airdrop, dev buy too, right? So a couple of things on so I guess in terms of the dev buy, what that looks like is basically sending Ethereum in the transaction to deploy a token. This is only possible through the SDK in the UI for now. But basically what that does, it gives you the best price of the token. So you're the first swap in that pool, and those tokens are transferred to you immediately. So kind of on the topic of a dev buy, what I like to say is like, you know, there should be a purpose of the dev buy. I would suggest like not selling that amount like close to launch, just because that can be kind of like a poor signal for traders, and can kind of set the wrong tone for the token. And then in terms of the vaults, so basically what that looks like is you can designate a certain percentage of supply for yourself, right, as the creator. And this is the minimum lockup time for this is 1 week. We do this to prevent kind of like that rug vector, because these tokens are given to you for free. This is kind of this allows also like a natural price discovery to happen until you get those tokens received. So I also recommend, you know, if you are going to vault, or this applies to airdrops as well, I suggest providing or just implementing a vesting schedule. So what this looks like is I can say, I want to deploy this token. I'm gonna be able to claim, you know, whether it's 30%, 20% in 1 month. But after that month, I would like to continuously claim this percentage over the next 6 months. So what this does is basically it kind of gives you all of that supply spread out through that full timeline there. And specifically to airdrops, when, you know, those tokens are not claimable by you, the creator, what I suggest is definitely basically like vesting that supply, whatever that amount is. And I would say, like, you know, be cautious about airdropping too much of a percentage, because what happens is sometimes that the liquidity can be affected by the sell pressure, right? Because when you do airdrop, these tokens are also given out for free. There's not enough Ethereum in the pool. There you can run into liquidity issues there. So that's another reason why I suggest kind of like doing that vesting schedule for those as well.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I guess like in terms of the airdrop range, like the percentage of token supply to airdrop, like is there any typical like best practice around that?
Yeah, you know, so there's a minimum of 1/4% that has to be sent out through the total amount of the airdrop. Basically what happens is if you're going to do it through the UI, you're going to upload a list of addresses and the amount of tokens for each address that are claimable. What I like to kind of do is, you know, I wouldn't be, just because like these tokens should be kind of like, you know, special, anywhere from between 0.1% to 1% of the token supply per address would be healthy. But just making sure that, like, you know, you kind of like trust, I don't know, these people are kind of designated specific amounts per address is definitely a best practice there. I wouldn't do like, you know, 10% per one address unless they're like contributors or, you know, partners or investors, whatever they may be.
Right.
So yeah.
Makes sense. And then, so this airdrop list can be updated, but then I think you said like the percentages cannot, like that's kind of set.
Yep. So that total percentage just set aside for the airdrop, that cannot be updated. But you can basically change the recipients or things like that. That's actually one area that I'm trying to improve on the Clanker World website right now. So it might be a little finicky. Hit me up if you run into any issues there. But yeah.
And then how does it work? Like, do you just provide a list of addresses and amounts? Like, what does that flow look like?
Yeah. So basically, you can just re-upload it to the website. But there's also a contract method that's required there. As of now, it's only used as kind of like a fallback mechanism. So it's like, basically we still have to do some work around there for like updating it on chain. So there's a little bit of complexity to it. We also store this Merkle tree on our database. So we kind of store that for you. But a general suggestion that I have is just keeping that final list of that CSV that you upload somewhere on your desktop, just to reference later if there's run into any issues there.
Okay, cool. So the part that like I think it took me the longest to like really understand a bit more was like just like liquidity side of things, and like how to add liquidity, and like how to think about like just all of that side of it. Is there anything you can explain just like how that whole process generally works, and like any best practices or things like that to think about?
Sure, totally. Yep. So in earlier versions of Clanker, right, a full range Uniswap liquidity position would be placed from the starting market cap to theoretically infinity, but kind of like around like 1.8 billion. And what that does, it sets a certain amount of tokens for sale in a given price range. What we've added with V4 is the ability to basically designate certain percentages of supply in between two like tick ranges. So let's say we have a project configuration that I believe it's 10% between the starting market cap, which is 10 ETH, to about 200K US dollars. It's denominated in Ethereum. So it trades pretty quickly around there. It doesn't gather much liquidity. You'll kind of see the chart kind of going up and down very drastically. But once it hits about that 200K range, you'll see it kind of like absorbing more buys and gathering more Ethereum or WETH in the liquidity pool, because it's a more dense section of tokens for sale between those ranges there. So what'll happen is kind of like you'll see kind of like the trades, it'll absorb larger buys or sells. And this is all configurable through the SDK. And I think another healthy like best practice for deploying tokens is actively managing liquidity positions. So this really comes into effect later on in a token lifecycle. A few months down the road go by, the token's doing well. What people can do is place external LP positions on your token, basically by providing the token or wrapped Ethereum to kind of like provide additional liquidity for that. What that does is it actually cuts into the creator fees. So a general best practice here is, as you're kind of like your token is kind of moving up and down, if you have kind of those funds to basically either you could pad either side of it or go above it. So if you want to add additional liquidity and you only have like WETH, or if you want to only provide WETH, you can do that basically under the current tick or the price range. And what that does, it absorbs the sell pressure. So you put in Ethereum, as it sells, as people sell into it, you'll accumulate more of that token. Inversely, if you place a liquidity position above the current tick, you can basically, this is with the Clanker token, or any token, specific to this token, it's a Clanker token. You provide this Clanker token, and in an exchange, you get WETH generally as people buy into that range. So additionally, like, if people sell as well in that area too, you'll get back either one of those two. If you want to do kind of like overlapping, right, at the current mark or price range there, you'll want to provide both of those tokens.
Got it. Thanks. That's really helpful. And then the other part that like I also just would love to learn more about is just like, can you explain more about sniping? Like, first of all, like, what is sniping? Because I think there are builders that maybe haven't been as exposed to this world. And then like, how does that work? And just like general things to look out for if you're launching a token.
Totally. What snipers are, basically they're external participants in the network that are listening to tokens being deployed through the factory contract. And what happens in a lot of these cases is they're generally like the first buy into the newly created pool. Generally they get the best price, which eventually they will sell, and it doesn't really do well. What we've implemented is basically it's a sniping. So what happens is, as of now, it's set to around 15 to 30 seconds post deployment. There's an 80% tax that's set from the initial launch, and it decreases to around 5% once it reaches that end timing there. So basically it just like penalizes kind of the automated buyer through that. This can also be extended to, I believe, 2 minutes. What happens is you can really extend that time. I think that sometimes, like, right, as you're playing around with this, I think some people are really quick at pressing buy too manually. So it can affect kind of like those like organic traders as well. But this is our approach to kind of like mitigating the sniping issues there. But I think like snipers, like anywhere, it shows that like a token is being deployed and it's a token. Primarily they listen to kind of like the social context, right? Whether it's the message sender, which could be a known address tied to a popular account or a builder, and they kind of like listen to those kind of like insights from the context.
Got it. Yeah. And then I guess like there's the other Clanker fees, I guess. How does that work specifically? Yeah, I'd love to hear more.
Totally. Yeah. So when you deploy a token, you can designate, there's a few things that you can do, right? So what happens is you can set up to 7 recipients that will basically be able to collect the fees off of the trading volume. And what that's percentage, when you do deploy it, So it can range from, you could deploy a token with 0% fees, but generally speaking, it's around 1 to 3% of trading volume. So if I do in theory, in like a, perfect, vacuum, if I buy $100 worth of a token with Ethereum, $1 of that, or 1%, will be directed to the rewards pool. And you can also designate to take this in just the paired token, which is generally WETH, or the Clanker token, which is kind of the new one there, or both. So like kind of what we've seen in the past is both, right? Previous versions of Clanker, taking 1% on the buy, 1% on the sell, would result in kind of like either the WETH on the buy, the sell on that Clanker token there. What it does, right? So like, for example, if I decide to do a token that just collects fees in the Clanker token, right? If I do a buy on it, basically what that's doing is buying the token back with that WETH and basically giving me that token back. Inversely, if I do it just in WETH and I decide to sell a token, that's actually converting the token back to WETH, which is then sent to the rewards pool. And then a little bit more in the rewards pool here. So you can designate up to 7 recipients for it. And each of those has an admin that has the ability to update the reward recipient address, as well as, basically like, so for each of those reward recipients, you can designate whether it's WETH, both, or paired, or WETH, both, or Clanker token. Those cannot be changed. The addresses can be changed. You can also not change the fee percentage. There's options to do like a dynamic or a static fee percentage. What the dynamic fees look like is basically during times of high volatility, we're measuring this by how many ticks are crossed in a given time interval. Those fees can spike up to the max. We suggest doing a 3%, for kind of like that trader impact there. So it can spike up, but then also like if no one's really trading the token or it's a quiet time, you can send in a buy and it'll just go for that lower percentage. So yeah, that's kind of, our attempt there. And I guess like I could also maybe like talk about like when to use what. Generally speaking, like for like fun, like meme tokens, I suggest doing a static 1%, right? Because it's like fun, price can go up. You kind of want traders to participate in this. If you're building like a project like for example like SQL, where this token is a revenue generating event for their team, they deployed with a static 3%, which is a higher tax, but it also results in kind of like more revenue for the creator through these trading fees.
Got it. Okay. And then so like you suggest kind of like the dynamic 3% when there's low trading volume.
Yeah, I think the dynamic 3% is a happy medium, right? If you don't want to be like fully static with a higher one, but you also want to encourage like, healthy trading, or, participation. I suggest the dynamic 3%. If you want to kind of dig, or anyone out there listening, if you want to dig more into it, just check out our SDK. You can kind of like tweak those parameters there.
Cool. And then like I want to get into just general best practices for those that are launching tokens, maybe if it's their first token or maybe like they've done a few before. What have you seen just works well, doesn't, more like high level?
Totally. Yeah. So I think there's like a lot to cover. Some of it, like I feel like we've covered a lot, or a decent amount of the technical side of it. A lot of kind of what goes into deploying a token is like the off-chain part of it, right? Whether that's, I think it really starts with marketing and talking about the token, right? I think that from the start, it's important to set expectations with the community or your followers or people that might be interested in purchasing a token. Just being straightforward and be like, hey, I'm having fun with this. What I like to say is under promise, over deliver. So, not to get like, don't promise like future returns or expectations. Like, I feel like that kind of like walks a fine line. And I think a big part of this is just like making sure that like, keep protecting people's like reputation too, right? Like, I think a lot of this is just trust based, and a lot of that is like off chain. So, just being transparent with people. I suggest like if you're gonna like tweet about it or cast about like this token, and like you see the price going up, it's probably not a good idea to like sell immediately after you talk about it, just because like people can trace that back to you and be like, all right, well, this is a pump and then a dump. So yeah, just keeping kind of like an eye on that. I feel like it's like a general rule of thumb there. So yeah, I think like that's That's kind of it. What else here? Yeah, just basically like don't impersonate projects or people. I feel like that's like should be kind of like standard rule there, but like people will be able to be like, all right, well, they didn't deploy this token, or they're not talking about it. So I don't know. I feel like that's just
general rule of thumb: don't impersonate
exactly.
people. That is one thing I do really like about Farcaster. Is my shill for Farcaster is like you can see who launched the token, and then you can go directly to their profile, and so you're able to see like, is this actually the person? So that's like the social signaling really helps, and like who else is holding this token. So definitely like do your own research and make sure this is like the right token, the person who launched it that you think that actually did.
Totally. And I think that's super important to like on the trader side too, right? Like before you like, just ape into any token, I would be like, hey, like, is this the real project token? Have they talked about it? Before what like I think Farcaster and Clanker, why it's such a perfect combo is because we tie the both together, right? We put in the social context with the deployment context to really give traders as much transparency into kind of that deployment as possible there.
Yeah. What about like multi-sig best practices? Like, what do you recommend?
Definitely recommend, some sort of like multi-sig, whether it's for like the reward admins, the reward recipients, just to make sure that like if an account is compromised, that's, it could compromise the entire project. So making sure that like the funds are secure is definitely like a best practice there. Gnosis safe, and shout out Team Splits. They're great too. And a hardware wallet when you can have it, I think is a viable option there too.
Awesome. And then had some community questions, so I'm gonna
cool.
share some of them. Yes, you actually covered a lot of them, so this is perfect. I guess like one thing, so Shira has a question around how should founders or anyone launching a Clanker think about reward recipient splits? Who should actually earn from trading fees, and what kind of splits have you seen work best?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I think what you cannot change on the current contracts are basically like the percentage allocated to, basically it's like if I set 50% to take it in WETH, 50% to take it in both. Those, like, you can't change like the percentages or the reward tokens sent to that address. You can change the addresses there. What I'd say is like if you're not fully sure if you want to take all of it in WETH or if you want to take all of it, or basically like making sure that like or if you want to do kind of like alternatives there, kind of like making sure that like, or I guess one example here is like if you have a team and you're like managing a team, I would set your address or the multi-sig address or a hardware wallet as the admins to this, and then maybe like whether it's like your team or an individual, just being able to kind of update it through that if it's required. Yes, yeah, it could be like another good use there where it's like you just have like the safe as the admins, and then having the ability to have like maybe like a hot wallet or something for the claim. Anyone can call the claim method for any account. So it's kind of a good thing there. And then was the second part, could you remind me about the second part?
Who should actually earn from trading fees, and what kind of splits have you seen work best?
Well, I've seen some really cool use cases where whether it's, like basically maybe a project wants to take, a 1% fee, but setting, half of that aside for leaderboard rewards through a mini app or, giveaways or kind of things like that. You can just designate like a treasury to one of those. And that way it's like, it doesn't mix the funds. You could kind of run fun incentives through that as well. Really, it's kind of up to you to kind of like have fun with. But I think like that's a really like healthy also like way to do it too.
Cool. She also had another question. What's a sensible approach to initial liquidity and dev buy size for a smaller bootstrapped app? I know we talked about dev buy for like size.
Yeah, I think it's what I like to say is like the dev buy should have a purpose, right? I think like anywhere between like a 0.1 ETH buy to like a 0.5 ETH buy is fine. You can also get these tokens for free for through the vault. So I see less of a need to do a dev buy. This was more important when we didn't have that much, didn't have sniper protection, whereas ensuring that you'd get that best price. But I think, as kind of like we've progressed here, there shouldn't be a big need to kind of like provide Ethereum into like your own token, unless, you know, that's something that you want to do to show like conviction. But like, yeah, again, like I wouldn't suggest selling that dev buy amount shortly after launch. But yeah, anywhere between there, I'd say is healthy. Really, whatever you're comfortable with. If you do want to, so one other thing on liquidity. Sure, you could do the dev buy with it. That does add like liquidity to it right through there, like at launch. And you can kind of like figure out, basically it'll spike the chart. Or, you know, additionally, you could just provide that Ethereum, you know, after launch. Maybe it's like, you know, kind of hanging out around like 200K or so. Provide that width below that price range there, which will help kind of keep the price in that range.
Got it. And then just one more question, because I know that I have to go, but I guess like what someone asked, how can you accommodate different entities on deployment? Like what if different companies are working on the app? I know you talked about like having the different recipients. So there's like a lot of different options here on like if a lot of people are participating. Do you have any like recommendations on which route they should go if it's like these are people all working together? Totally.
Yeah. You could kind of do up to those 7 reward recipients there. If it doesn't exactly match your use case, please hit me up, because I'd love to hear like your you know what your use case is, because we'd love to match that and make it easier. But what you could also do is using like third-party tools like Hedgy Finance to kind of like or splits, right? I think splits is another great idea of like basically designated percentages to go to like these accounts. So really kind of either way there. Kind of just like plugging things together. But I'd say like, yeah, basically just like ensuring that kind of like this is like, you know, yeah, adjustable in case of like, you know, things change.
Yeah, and then just like one other question that I've just been getting a lot. So like, how is Clanker going to be integrated into Farcaster? Like what can you share? Like what's something that people should be aware of?
Ooh, well, I'm really excited about the token pages. I think that like we have a lot of this deployment data on like the Clanker World websites, but I'm really excited to put this in feed, right? Like being able to really do your own research directly on that swap. That's one of my really favorite things. I'm also excited about kind of playing with like the social side of it, right? Where it's like maybe you get a group of people together and, you know, you want to either like launch a token together or contribute to one of your friends that is launching a token, and kind of like having that like fair market entry would be really cool. But I think like overall like the Farcaster wallet is so incredible. I think that like there's so many opportunities for us to like really experiment with and try things out. But I think at least Clanker's goal from the start was having like these tokens be transparent. Excited to really extend that into the Farcaster eco and greater infrastructure.
Yeah, same here. And for those that have feature requests or ideas, like please share with us, because we're at this stage where we're getting all this feedback and kind of working on the roadmap for the closer integration. So please share things that you're looking for, or just if you have questions about Clanker. Hopefully this stream helped. I know it helped answer some questions for me, and you've been really gracious with your time teaching me. So yeah,
anytime.
That's pretty much it for the stream. So really appreciate the time. Other questions, just feel free to DM me. Where can people find you on Farcaster?
Yeah, I'm just at Dish on Farcaster.
Sweet. I'm at Linda, so pretty easy. All right. Well,
hit
thanks
us up
for your
whenever.
time.
Yeah. Thanks, Linda.
Awesome.
See ya.
Cool. All right. See you guys. Bye.